Hi, guys. Welcome back to Being a Mom Sucks. Today's guest is the founder of a nonprofit organization, MAS Cultura. She's also this year's Young Hispanic Professional Associations of Austin's Legacy Award recipient. She's building and bringing culture and community together, and she's a mom, y'all. This is Monica Maldonado.
Hi, everyone.
Hi,
Welcome to the show.
welcome.
So, how are you doing today, Monica?
I'm doing pretty good. I can't complain. It's a beautiful day outside.
Yes, you
Yes,
just
it
celebrated
is.
your birthday too, so happy belated birthday.
Thank you. Yeah, I was in my feelings about that.
Oh no, about your birthday? Tell us about the feelings, girl. Tell us about the
Yes.
feelings.
Well, it's the 4/8, and so it was just one of those mornings where I woke up and I was like, "Oh gosh, I'm getting old. 2 more years till I'm 50." And then I just had to remind myself that it's all good.
Yes, yes.
It's
I'm
just a
kind of
number.
yes, and no lie, like this morning I was just telling Rachel, I was like, man, I'm getting old. Like I need earplugs when I go to shows now, and I feel so lame. But I feel like 50 is gonna be it for me. Like that's gonna be my year. Like that's gonna be the good times.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to 50 and just in general, like taking an accumulation of my journey and just saying like, okay, it's time to just relax.
Yes.
Time to slow down and enjoy everything.
So, speaking on your journey, tell us a little bit about yourself, Monica. For people that don't know all the amazing things that you do, give us a little backstory on yourself.
Okay, I'll try and make it short and sweet. So, I'm based here in Austin, Texas. I'm a first generation. And a little bit about myself, I'm a mom. I have 2 kids. I was a teen mom. So, I became an empty nester when I was pretty young. And I think for me, it was kind of a rebirth at that moment, which is, I think, really where I started reconnecting with my passion for art and music and community as well.
I love that. Your nonprofit, MAS Cultura, what inspired you and motivated you to start this nonprofit organization? And tell us what it's about.
Yeah, for sure. I'll start off with sharing what MAS Cultura is about. So, the mission of MAS Cultura is to ensure that Latino communities have access to cultural programming that inspires and educates. And the inspiration for MAS Cultura really was born from my own identity crisis. So, how I mentioned earlier, I was a teen mom, became an empty nester young. When I became an empty nester, I moved to Phoenix and I moved there for a job opportunity and with an understanding that it was a short term change and that eventually I would either end up in California or back in Texas. So, while I was in
Wow.
Phoenix, I was living in an art district. And so, was reintroduced to art and also just really started learning a lot about public transit, public art. And when came back home to Austin, which I was only in Phoenix a year and 8 months, I came back to Phoenix and I had this really, I really felt lost like in my own city. I can't really describe it any other way.
Right.
And also, I kind of felt like my friends that, obviously had known them for many years, a lot of them were now like soccer moms. And in
Wow.
the
Yeah.
meantime, like I was already an empty nester. And
Right.
so there was this whole identity crisis. And most of it came from not having a sense of belonging in my own city.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, y'all are, I believe, in Houston or just across the U.S., that we all are having to adjust to the economy, to our city
Mm-hmm.
growing. And then what does it look like as the city grows and everything's changing around us? And how do we stay true to who we are and feel like we belong where we're at? And so for me, Mas Cultura, I didn't know then that it would be what it is now, but it definitely, that's what started that curiosity of, okay, well, I don't see the things that make me feel like I belong in this city, and then how do I make that happen?
Oh,
Man,
wow. That's so
yeah, that is
awesome.
really something. That is really something. And so, what type of things do you guys do? I mean, I know that you've done a lot of different stuff as far as like with the Uvalde kids. I know that y'all did the murals out there, and I know that you do a lot of lowrider stuff. And I just every time I look over, I'm just like, wow, just you're doing so much, and everything that you do just looks so beautifully put together. It's just you can really see that you're passionate about what you're doing and that every little detail is so important to you.
Yeah, everything that I touch, it definitely comes from a place, a deep place of who I am, my upbringing, and also just seeing the disparity that happens within our communities, right? And
Yes.
what's really interesting, why you were sharing with me, all the things that you've seen. Recently, I got to work with a young group, and some of them were really struggling because, and I want to kind of, in my mind, when I jumped onto this call, I thought, okay, this is about being a mom. And so there's this young generation that's really hungry for creating and also for making sure that their culture doesn't get lost and are having that same identity crisis that I had a few years ago, right?
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was working with these young girls, I remember thinking, oh, wow, they just really don't know who they are yet.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. What was that like, seeing that come back full circle like that?
Yeah, I think having to come really thinking about how I could mentor them, right?
Yes.
And the most important thing for me, which circles back to what your comments, was that when we create whatever that is, whether it's you with this podcast, whether it's us interacting with our children or being in community, that it really just has to come from a place, a genuine place.
Yes.
Like you can't
Yes.
fake it.
Yes.
Like I keep telling people, like you can't fake it. You can't try and do what I do. I can't try and do what you do.
It's true.
And so, a lot of projects or a lot of ideas get put in front of me. And for me, it's always just really organic. I lead by like, what does it feel like?
Mhm.
So I rely a lot on my intuition. And the things that I do create or produce, for me, it's always about, is the story going to be told? And if it is it my place to help tell that story? So I've done a lot of meaningful projects. Obviously, the Uvalde one was probably the most emotionally wearing, I guess would be the
Yes.
right word.
Uh-huh.
I spent almost 3 months in Uvalde working with the families and creating the 21 murals
Oh,
and
wow.
coordinating with the artist. And even until this day, I still and still communicate with some of the parents. But that was a lot, and in itself, the projects that I work with are on, it's always about, you know, our community or people
Mhm.
in our community being underrepresented and then their stories being untold. And so the same thing goes like with the lowriders, which that's taken a life of its own. And recently I had the pleasure of talking to someone about masculinity, working with men. And I do think actually this platform is one of those platforms that's a good place to kind of share about what my work has been with working with men in the community.
Mhm.
With the lowriders, I see them as a piece of art.
Yeah.
They're an expression of someone. And the more time I spent hanging out at the park or getting to know, the guys from the lowrider car club, is that I noticed that there was this natural leadership that men had, but that there were so many stigmas around men, whether it's around them as fathers, as leaders, as, community givers, and that we really don't ever give them a break.
Yeah.
Like they can't ever catch a break because there is a lot that we demand from men.
Mhm.
And so with MAS Cultura and working with the lowriders, one of the things is that we've really created a safe space for them to be vulnerable, to be able to give back to community. And I think through them giving back to the community and also being seen, that's really where change happens, right? Like we can't make change alone as women
Right.
until we really start giving our men permission and space to be vulnerable. That's when real true change happens in our community and in our families too.
I love that.
Yes. Yeah. I love that
I
too.
love that. Yes, that you're using your platform not just for, self-growth or anything like that. It's more about the representation of those that aren't seen, like you said. And that's such a beautiful thing. And man, that's really, it's really true what you say, the load that we lay on our men. It it's kind of like the same that society puts on women.
Mhm.
We don't realize all that, but we also don't realize that there's a load that's, that's expected of men as well, that society has put on them, and being vulnerable is a huge thing. I think just with men in general, but I also know that in the Hispanic community, it's a very, very like taboo thing for a man to
Mhm.
be vulnerable. So I think that that's a beautiful thing that you're creating, and that space that you're providing for artists to be represented, and for these men to have that safe space, because we don't. I'm guilty of it too. You don't think about a safe space for men. Not until I became a mother of boys did I ever, have that sympathy, or, think about stuff like that. So I think that that's beautiful what you're doing.
Yes, exactly, and making it more culturally acceptable for them to show their vulnerabilities and their emotions and all that stuff, because that's what we need. I think, like Nina was saying, like you were saying, is that we do put so much on them, and that's one of the biggest things, I think, is that we expect them to be strong all the time and not break down and not be weak, quote unquote weak, And so that's great that you're opening that for them to be able to share that side of
Yes,
themselves.
yes, yes.
Yeah, we have a really amazing project that actually was initiated by someone in the community who's a brown beret, Chicano activist, muralist. And I remember when he contacted me, it's so funny. Like, you literally could picture this man, like, with a bandana and lopes, right? And he's like, hey, mija, like, I want to do this thing. I want to give bikes to kids in the neighborhood. I see
Aw.
that kids still, like, walk to school. And I'm like, oh, okay. So we met and we talked about like what it would take for him, and that he would have to own the program, and he would have to go and ask for bike donations, and that we would support him in that. And you fast forward, and it's one of my favorite projects that MAS Cultura now oversees, and
I love it.
it's a little homie's bike project. But what was really powerful about it is the first time we did a volunteer call for it, and all the volunteers, all except for one, they were all men. And
Man.
Oh, wow.
seeing that interaction between a man handing a bike to a child, helping him adjust the seat, helping him select a helmet, for
That's huge.
for a lot of these children that may not have father figures, or
Yes,
maybe
absolutely.
or maybe they have a father at home but their father's always working or whatnot.
Right.
I think that intimacy that happened at that moment, that's something that child's going to remember forever, right? That subconsciously it just creates like that there are men that care, and that there are
Yeah. Mhm.
other ways to see men. But yeah, I hope that kind of gives you an idea a little bit.
I also think that also, it kind of ignites a little healing, because you never know, some of these men might be trying to heal their inner child, and you know what I mean, like they might have not have grown up with the father figures that they, ideally wanted to have, and so they're out here providing that for,
Yeah.
the community, and healing themselves in a way, man, that's just so
Yeah.
great. It's really so admirable that you're just doing so much, and you're helping so many people in so many different ways. It's just, man, it's really something, Moni.
Yeah, and I think too, as women and being a mom, I think when we become moms and we're raising our children, I think a lot of us, we either take on a very nurturing role, or we take a role that is more masculine, right? Where we're the decision makers, and
Mm-hmm.
we're navigating life from an alpha.
Uh-huh.
And so that for me over the past, year has been something, learning about femininity, masculinity. And it's just like all those things that nobody ever talks to you about. Because it's
Right.
like you become a mom, and then your focus is to raise those children.
Right.
And then once you're done raising them, you're like, and what about me? And
Right.
then,
Now what?
yeah, and then you discover, either bad habits bad habits that you inherited during that time. And then you start realizing, like, shoot, I wasn't really living to my full potential because I was too busy raising kids. And
Right.
so it just takes a whole nother journey, which for me feels like, yes, Mas Cultura has been part of that journey. But then also for me, a big part of the journey is, I wouldn't say not seeing myself as a mom, because obviously I'm a mom, but also rediscovering like who I am as a person, as a woman, and how I show up, and really having to retrain and break a lot of behavior that came from, being a single mom, being a teen mom, and really just being in survivor mode, right?
Yes.
So I feel like when you're a mom, that we would just naturally navigate into survivor mode, and through that we really lose the essence of our femininity, right? And it is
Yeah.
beautiful now because you start seeing, I think we're in an era right now where there's a lot of talk about, femininity, and even sage and all the healing things, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's great because it feels like, oh wow, everyone's talking about what this is. And so there's a lot of resources for that. But I think when you're a mom, like you're so, you're like nose down to the ground just trying to get through every day, that you don't really get to explore all those things.
Yeah. You don't really get to. I think that what you're saying is so true. You almost don't realize who you are until until the kids are gone. I feel the same. Like my mom, I think about my mom, and I'm like, man, I don't think my mom lived her full potential until we were grown. Until my dad passed, until she was a grandma, and now she's out there living her best life. And I kind of feel bad about that. Like, I'm just like, damn, I kind of held my mom up. She wanted to do all these things, but she's doing them now, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And I think that's so great that that you took the time to do this self-discovery, and to build yourself back up, and get rid of those habits that you said. And I think that in itself is so inspiring, because I think that when you do become a mom, you, like you said, your nose to the ground, you kind of forget about yourself. We don't take care
Mhm.
of ourselves. So I think it's so important that women take the time to find themselves, and to fall in love with themselves all over again. Because when I look at you, that's what I see. I'm like, man, she is fucking doing it, and she is all about it. And I just see all this light in you, and I'm like, man, she is feeling herself, and rightfully so, because oh my god, girl, like you are just it's so awesome to see so much. Like seeing you win that award, and just watching you do all these things. It's just so cool to know that, like, I know this person, and you're like in an arm's reach of me, and it's inspiring, because it's like, man, if she can do it, we can all do it. And it's just like, oh, I
Yes,
just
I
love you
do
for it.
believe
I
that.
love you for it.
I do believe that we can all do it. And I believe that we can all do it. And what it boils down to is that we just have to find that thing that sparks us, right?
Yes, yes.
And also that it doesn't have to be anything big.
Right.
You know, I
Yeah.
I mean, when I was like, I want to be part of something, like I want to do more for my city, I had all these ideas and I would bounce them off my friend. And she would always play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
But there was one thing that she said, and it really stood out to me, which was, she said, well, you got to figure out what it is that you love and then what there's a need for.
Mm-hmm.
And like those two things, right? The
Yeah.
intersection of those two things. And I mean, I love a lot of things, right? Like I'm a
Right.
very eclectic person. I've been around art my whole life, was with the musician for many years. And for me, I thought, well, I really just love people. And I started really small. Like I started volunteering at a food pantry on Saturdays. And
Nice.
and for me, I got to interact with people, and that's where I started learning the stories.
Yes.
So it just starts small. Like you don't have to go and build, create a nonprofit or do anything big. But it brought me joy. Like that interaction brought me joy. And it's really what fueled, everything else that came down the road. And then I also remember another person. I have a friend who lives in California, and I remember being on this phone call. He was checking in on me to see like how was Austin, transitioning from Phoenix to Austin, and I was complaining. I was like, oh my god, Austin's so whitewashed, and oh, I can't do this, and I miss all the things. And he straight up, he just told me, he goes, well, you know what it sounds like? He goes, it sounds like you're just on the sidelines watching. And he
Wow.
goes, and if you're really not that happy with what's going on in the city or the lack of, he goes, and it's up to you to do something about it, right?
To add something.
And so that was a ouch. That was one of those ouch moments. And then I remember finally one day calling him and being like, I'm not on the sidelines anymore.
Oh.
Yes. I love it.
Oh.
Man, I love that. So, what do you think are the biggest challenges that you faced doing this? I know you said your kids are grown, but I know your daughter is a lot. She's very much involved in a lot of things that you do with Mas Cultura. What has that been like? Like the challenges
Yeah.
and the rewards and all that, having your family in that with you.
Yeah. So it's interesting, I had for my birthday Monday, I had dinner with my kids and my mom. We have a really small family. And I went out Sunday. I had like Sunday fun day.
Yes.
And I was hurting on Monday. That's when I was having I'm 48. I'm getting
Yes,
old.
yes.
I need to I was like, I need to get off them streets. I need to stay home. But I'm just being real, like
Hurting. You
very
were
real with
hurting.
y'all, right? And I was at dinner and I was like telling my kids, oh my God, I shouldn't have gone out. I'm going to retire. And my son, which he's very mature for his age, and he's like the most responsible one out of all of us in the family. And he goes, well, mom, he's like, you don't have any responsibilities. And I'm like, no, I do. I have a job. I have a nonprofit, right? But it's just kind of funny the way he sees my life.
Like
And he
it's just
kind of,
something fun,
yep,
not
like
a
it's just
job.
one big fun party, right? I would say the challenges and
Oh,
yeah. So that same dinner, right when we were leaving, my daughter looks at me and she's like, "Mom," she's like, "I really needed my mom last week." She's like, "I know you're really busy," and it really hurt me to hear her say that. And she goes, "What does your schedule look like this week?" Um, and I would probably say that is the challenge, right? Which
yeah.
is the balancing
Mm-hmm.
and balancing being a mom. I have a full time career. So also being a leader for my team and
Mm-hmm.
then also being the founder of MAS Cultura. So the balancing of all of that is the biggest challenge. When it comes specifically to being a mom and, as you mentioned about my daughter being involved in the organization or also curating, is that the challenge is for me to help support her in knowing that she's her own person
Mm-hmm.
and that there's nothing about my steps that she has to follow, right?
Right.
And I
Hmm.
imagine that sometimes she just had her very first event for Hispanic Heritage Month where she curated the art exhibition, and I could feel like she thought like, oh wow, am I gonna was she gonna impress me? Was it gonna be up to
Yeah.
expectations? And I think that and nurturing that part of her and letting her know like just because I'm your mom, and I have to tell her sometimes, like, we're having this conversation, and it's not me as the founder of Mas Cultura. And then there's other times, it's, me as your mom. And then there's been other times where I'm like, okay, we got to have this conversation. It's Monica, the founder of Mas Cultura, right? Which are like really
Yes.
tough conversations about what the expectations are and how do we deliver and how do we show up for community. So the challenge is always, it is that balance. And I would say the most rewarding part is just seeing how the work that I do or how and I really don't like to use the word work. I like to say serve, how I serve the community, how that impacts people.
Mm-hmm.
And I genuinely feel that there's a lot of people that through what Mas Cultura has done, it's given them their voice back.
Yes.
And I see so many people where it's like, wow, I remember that one little thing we did for them or
Yeah.
that one little opportunity we created for them. And now they're doing such big things. So
That's
that's the rewarding part is really just seeing how the community comes together and then just how we help give people, uplift their voice.
that's really something. That is really something. I love it. I love
I
it
like how
all.
you were talking about like the balance between like being mom versus the founder and how you have to navigate that path because yeah, when you're working with family or friends or whatever, it can be hard to do that and still, like the love is still there, but there's
Yes.
Yeah,
difficult
there's some friends I don't
conversations.
work with. I'm like, there's some friends that they're like, I want to come work with you. And then they quickly realize, I'm like, we're better off just being friends and not working together,
Let's not
right?
mix. Let's not mix.
And you know what is interesting too? And I think this is really important is that I have my friends and they're my childhood friends, Melly, Mickey, Fatso, Camina. And what I really love is when I spend time with them, which I'm getting ready to pencil it in, and I'm like, okay, I miss y'all. I need y'all. because with those friends, like they could care less, right? Like they could care less what award I've won,
Right.
what project I'm working on.
Right.
Like we can just hang out, talk about, I was going to say men, but boys.
Right. Yes.
Talk about relationships, talk about work, talk about our kids. Um, and I do think that it's important that we have people in our life that we can just be ourselves and that there is no expectations. And and that is one of the things that I do intentionally when we talk, people talk about self-care. And I was on this panel and they're like, "Oh, what do you do for self-care?" And there's like 7 of us on the panel, and they started at one end and people, uh started sharing. And when they got to me, I was like, "Honestly, for me, it's like going to the flea market."
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
it's like I can just be myself, right? I can be myself. There's no agenda, right?
Yes.
There's no
Right, right.
networking, who's who. And I think it is important for us to go back even to places that were important to us, in our childhood, whether it's like that restaurant or the block that we lived in on or the park that we hung out at. I think all those type of things help re-energize us and also help us refocus on like what really matters.
Yes,
Yes.
keeps you grounded.
Man. So, okay. So, Moni, with all the things that you've done, all these amazing things, and being a mom while doing all these things, what is your take on mom guilt?
Mom guilt.
Yes.
Define mom guilt for me.
So, mom guilt is where mom is doing all the things that mom needs to do and working and doing nonprofits and all these
Mm-hmm.
professional things, mom things, but still have the guilt that we're not doing enough.
Yeah, the mom guilt happens for sure. Mom guilt happens, and I have to give myself grace.
Hmm.
It actually is one of the things that I'm working on with knowing that, not knowing, but understanding that even though my kids are older, that they still need me, and maybe not in the ways that I think that they do.
Hmm.
Um, and I'll use my son as an example, right? He's grown to be really close to his dad, which his dad was absent a lot in his childhood. But now that he's older, they're really close because they have a bond, right? They
Right.
can, they barbecue together, they work on cars together, fix things around the house. They do all that together. So they have this bond. And for me, it's like, well, I can't do all those things. And so what am I supposed to do? And then this whole mom guilt thing, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
But I think is one of the things that I started doing, and I learned this through therapy, was just asking them, right? Like, what do how do you want to spend time together? And for my son, it's been really simple things, and it's just like when we all know about love languages and all those things, but I think it boils down to we just got to ask people how they need us to show up for them.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
so the mom guilt, it definitely is one of those things that I think is it just never gonna stop, right? Like we compare ourselves, and I done the same thing where I'm like, well, I can't pay your rent, because I know people that do that. Like they help their kid with their rent, or they help
Yeah.
their child with babysitting,
Yeah.
uh, dog sitting, or whatever it is. And I'm like going 100 miles per hour. I can't do those. I can't show up for them that way.
Right.
So really just asking them and being like, okay, what can I do for you? Or setting aside very intentional time that's uninterrupted. But for my son, I remember he's like, well, you can just come over and hang out. And I was like, okay. And I did. I went over there and hung out. And we just had the best time just hanging out and talking and him telling me about his job or whatnot. But in our heads, we make up this idea that our children need a lot more than what they actually truly do. And I think
Right.
that's at any age.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I like how it basically you boiled it down to such a simple solution. Like that people, it's so simple you just don't even think about it. Cause like you said, we build it up in our heads that they need this, this, and this. And really they're just like, no, just come hang out. Like that's all I need.
Yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
And
just
just
need you.
Yeah, all it takes is just asking, like, how do you want me to be there for you?
Right, and then being honest about what you can do, you know what I mean? Like, this
Mhm.
is what I can give, you know what I mean? And this is how I can show up for you.
Yes, and I think that just has to be across the board. I'm working on a car show right now, and I'm really borderline exhausted. But I remember yesterday thinking like, okay, I'm 48 now. What's going to be my thing, this year? And I was like, for every one yes I give, I'm going to give five no's.
It's true.
Yes,
It is
yes, that's
so
so
And
true.
I was
important.
like, so if you get a yes from me, the next five people who ask, they're getting no's, right? I think
Yep.
five is a little bit too much. I might do like four.
I might give a little grace and do 4.
But all about that balance. You can't overwork
Yeah,
yourself
yeah,
and overrun
absolutely.
yourself.
Yeah, there's this really, I listened to this podcast once that a friend of mine sent over to me. And of course, it talks about, productivity and us, being raised with measuring our validation based on how we perform, right? And
Mhm.
all the bad things that come with that. One of the things that they say on this podcast is that rest is actually how we ignite our imagination.
Wow.
And I can't feel that. So like now when I finish this project that are the deliverable for this car show is November 30th, like I will take all of December off, right, and
Mhm.
rest, and then that's when I can kind of regroup, and that is when all the ideas start coming,
Yeah.
is once I'm rested.
That's awesome. Awesome, awesome. Yeah, that I think that's true, and I think that what happens with a lot of people is instead of taking that rest period, they get burnt out, and then when you get burnt out, you quit, you know what I mean? People give up and they're just like, I can't do it anymore. I'm physically exhausted, mentally drained. I can't go anymore. So I think that you saying that and sharing that is so great, because I think that a lot of people don't allow themselves to take a break because of mom guilt, because of life or whatever have
Mhm.
you. People just get caught up in just going, 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 and we forget that we do need rest. You know what I mean? I mean, we're human. We need rest, and but I think that you putting it the way you put it is it's more like, dang, I do need to get some rest so that these
Yeah.
creative juices can start flowing again. And and there's so much truth to that, because when your mind is calm and you're clear and you have that rest, everything kind of does open up more, and you're like, oh wait, and it's kind of like, when you're trying to figure something out and you can't, and then later on it comes to you and you're like, oh,
Mhm.
this is how I can fix that.
Well, I hit burnout. I'm guilty of that. I hit burnout, after Uvalde happened. Well, I started MAS Cultura, and that first 2 years of MAS Cultura, I didn't stop. And that came from a mindset of feeling like, wow, if I don't take the opportunity now, it's not going to come later, right? That
Hmm.
scarcity mindset, right?
Right.
Someone else is going to take that opportunity from us. And there was just such a momentum that I didn't stop. I just kept going and going. And then of course, did Uvalde, and then came back from Uvalde, and then kept going. And
Hmm.
that I kept going because I didn't really want to deal with the pain of, the trauma and grief that I had inherited from doing the work in Uvalde. And
Yes.
so that being a workaholic, that's really a symptom of being avoiding other issues. In
Hmm.
that case, it was all the trauma that I hadn't processed. And so burnout was very real, and I had to take a semi sabbatical. And what I will say, as I heard you talking, is what burnout really does, and I think a clear indicator of burnout that I've come to acknowledge is when something's no longer giving you joy.
Mm.
And
Yes.
that's what I
Yes.
felt, because I was like, oh my God, I'm doing all this. It was feeling like work, which I hate using that word work, right? Because I feel like, no,
Yes.
I'm serving the community. But it was like I was going, 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 and it didn't allow me time to really deal with my emotions. And the worst thing was that I was becoming a person that was just producing, and that there were times that I just really didn't feel joy. And so that was when I was like, okay, I've got to reset. not necessarily, I didn't even use the word reset. I was like, I'm taking a semi-sabbatical. And I did for 6 months, where I didn't go out to functions. I very limited who I talked with and who I spent time with, and really had to release a lot of the things that I had internalized. Because you have to remember, MAS Cultura, a lot of the work that we do is in underserved communities.
Mm-hmm.
So besides mom grief, I generally just had this guilt grief, right? So
Right.
that I had a certain lifestyle, or guilty. I would feel guilty. I'm like, oh my God, like I live in this really nice home, and then I'd leave and go work in neighborhoods that, some people didn't have electricity. And then I was dealing with that guilt.
Yeah.
But through that, how I dealt with the burnout, what I ended up in therapy to really start learning about my behavior and learning new habits and coping mechanisms or whatnot. Because I also, with the burnout, started thinking like, okay, is this depression? Is this anxiety? Am I ADHD? I started giving myself self-diagnosing, and it's like, no, bitch, you're tired.
Oh yeah, we've all been down that web
Yeah,
and
you're just like, they're all, and I told my friend, I had a lunch yesterday with a friend, and I said, there's all these labels. And what it boils down to, and I learned this through my therapy, was they're really just emotions that
mm-hmm.
we haven't processed. And instead of processing them and dealing with them, whether it's, journaling or talking through it with somebody or writing yourself a letter, all these other tools that exist, we start giving ourselves labels for it.
Mm-hmm. I think that I feel that. I feel that. Cause I love to say or act like I know what's wrong with myself. And I don't know what's wrong with myself.
No, I get it. And I think the pressures that we have as moms, as women, there are so many pressures there. And then to still just exist as who you are, your truth.
Yeah.
And then to do whatever it is that's going to take for you to be the highest version of who you are. None of that is easy.
Right.
No, it's
None
not.
of it is easy. So it really is, and I encourage, if you have access to be able to get therapy, if you don't, and honestly, that all of it is within ourselves, and none of it is easy. There's mornings I wake up. I woke up this morning at 2 a.m. I was like, what would happen if I just cancel the event on November 30th?
Shit.
How many people would be mad? And I was like, I'm really just tired. I really just don't want to do this. It's a lot more work that I wanted it to do. And I have this entire week and this morning had to tell myself, you're doing the best that you can.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing the best. And
Yeah.
doing the best doesn't mean that what we produce is going to be perfect.
Right.
But as long as we're able to say, you know what, I'm doing the best that I can. And I ain't going to be mad at that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
if somebody else is, then, screw them.
Yeah.
right.
That's
It's
their
on them.
problem. Yep. Yep.
Exactly.
So Moni, if you could go back and talk to yourself whenever you were having this identity crisis, what would you say to yourself?
I would say, one, you're enough. And I think I would have given myself more permission to dream.
Oh,
I don't know that we're taught to, I mean, I wasn't personally taught to like dream big. Like my mom's dream for me was for me to work at HEB. Like I would have made it. you know like that was her dream. Like,
my
you're
goodness.
not working at a hotel, you're not working in a cafeteria. If you get a job at HEB, you've made it. And I think I had stopped dreaming at some point. And so when I was having that identity crisis, knowing that I was enough, and that I'm giving myself permission to dream,
That's great
never
advice. I
stop
love that.
dreaming, never stop dreaming.
Yes. And you're never too old to reach your dreams. You're never too late.
That's right. Man. Woof. I'm trying not to cry over here. Shit.
Well, I think, and I've known Nina now for many years, and it hasn't been easy for her. And we all have our own stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's just an anointment on us, on certain people, that you just can't deny.
Yep.
That we're made for greatness. I never really saw myself that way. I see Nina that way. She knows that.
Oh,
Yeah, I genuinely think she could make all her dreams possible. I just think that along the way there's so many things that happen that we trip over and that block our vision, right? So we just have to keep
Yeah,
moving those things so that the vision remains clear.
right. Yeah, because the thing about Nina,
Yes.
and from what I'm hearing from you, is y'all don't let those things stop y'all. Y'all get up and y'all might take a beat, but y'all get up and y'all keep going and let's go to the next thing. What can we do? How can we work around this? And yeah, you don't let yourselves get stuck, and that's important.
Man, I love y'all. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's the thing about me is that I'm always gonna find a way. I don't know if it's. I mean, I know it's because I come from a line of strong women, and
Mhm.
it's just what I've always seen my whole life. Is strong women all around me. I'm like, if these women can make a way, then I know
Hmm.
I can make a way. And so it's just oof, yeah,
Yeah, it's like, that saying, if there's a will, there's a way, right? And it's all just a journey.
yeah,
There's a lot of the stuff that I'm saying now that I couldn't have shared with you, 2 years ago, a year ago. And this past year, one of the things, and I couldn't have said this to you a few years ago, was, wow, I really don't have anything to prove to anybody.
yeah,
And that has given me so much freedom. And I don't know that before I would have said, oh yeah, I'm trying to prove something. I would have never said that. But subconsciously, obviously, whether that was trying to prove something to my mom, to myself, to my children, to people who had said, you're never going to make it, but to really finally come to a place and time in my life where I can say I don't have anything to prove to.
man.
Yeah. Yeah, and if all you're working for yourself and doing what you want to do for your dreams, and then you have that freedom to be able to go forward and do it.
I love that people will hear this story, and I know that it's going to move people because this isn't something that, like you said, that you could have said 2 years ago or even a year ago. Like you didn't start off big, like you said. You started off just volunteering. So like I think that this is really going to move people to, even if it's just wanting to do something in their community, and some people don't know where to start. You are so humble about everything that you've done, and just bringing back to the roots, and being a mom not just to your kids but the kids of the community as well. It's so awesome, Moni. You really something.
And I will say this for the moms that are listening. I was a teen mom, obviously struggling at some point, maybe working three jobs. But one thing I never did, and you can ask this, ask my kids, and they can tell you, I never let the financial struggle keep me from exposing my kids to the culture. My kids will tell you, I took them to theater. I would take them to the library to sit down, and when they would do like reading circles, I would take them with me to volunteer. I exposed them to music. I think my daughter at 7 years old was like at ACL festival, front row
Oh
with
my
the Missing
God,
Tooth, right?
yes.
So I always expose them to culture. And a lot of times people dumb down the impact that cultural arts can have. To me, cultural arts is so important beyond just visually,
Mm-hmm.
beyond it just being like there's a mural and it's beautiful, right?
Right.
Or that music sounds really good. I genuinely believe that cultural arts is plays a big part in making us feel like we belong, and that a sense of belonging plays into our mental health.
Yes.
And my
Yes.
kids, they both have an appreciation for cultural arts. And I genuinely believe that the fact that I took time when they were kids, even when I would drag them along and they didn't really want to go,
Mm-hmm.
that I see that in their lives now. And going to cultural art festivals, going to libraries, plays, music. Every mom out there, I encourage you, no matter the age of your child, that you expose them and introduce them to that,
Mm-hmm.
because you will see how it impacts them as an adult.
Yeah, I agree. Knowing your culture and feeling like you're a part of it gives you a sense of
Yes.
belonging.
And I think that right there is probably one of the biggest things is that you're building this, the community and sense of belonging. And I think that because of where you were at, you felt so lost. Like that's so huge to you, and it's reflecting, in everything that you're doing. All these people are coming together and they're like, this is our place. So it's, you did it, you know what I mean? You did it. You were without, and now you have built that into something for everyone, and no one will ever, I don't think they'll ever feel that without that you felt.
Yeah, I hear it all the time when people show up to our events. They'll be like, "Oh my God, this feels like home,"
Man.
or "This feels like, wow, there's other people here that look and sound like me," and that there's this alignment of who we are, as Latinos, and because we have our own issues about, first generation Chicanismo, Latinidad. Do you speak Spanish? Don't know Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that that has been one of the beauties of what I've created through MAS Cultura. That there, it's multi generational, so it welcomes people of all ages. Our number one follower is the ages from 24 to 32.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's the number one follower on our social media platform. And when people come to events, it doesn't matter whether or not you were raised speaking Spanish or not.
Yeah.
you know that you still have a right to celebrate, our traditions, and learn them, if you, for that matter, if you don't even know them. But that there is something really rich and beautiful about being Latino, and then being able to experience and celebrate that with other people.
So Moni, go ahead and give us, I know you said you have an event coming up in November 30th. Just share with our listeners a little bit about that event.
Yeah, so I have an event that I'm co-hosting here in Austin at the Palmer Event Center. So it's the auditorium near downtown. It is the 16th annual car show of Johnny Colunga, who's like the lowrider patriarch of Austin. He owns 13 cars
Oh wow.
and is, born and raised here in Austin. So we have this car show. She's headlining, but it's
Awesome.
really, really beautiful lineup. We have local art, a zoot suit contest, a wepa contest. And really it's just about coming together as one community and celebrating our people.
I love
So,
it. Yeah, I was literally backstage with her at the Snow the Product concert when
you
she
know
was
what
here.
I love about her? What I love is that we announced, Carolyn as the headliner with the other artists. And what I was most impressed about her and respect and admire is how much love she showed the other artists, the other female artists.
Yes.
So there are
Yeah.
other female artists on the bill. So it's Carolyn, and then Mrs. Gold, which is here out of Austin, young, emerging artist, which is, she's a little badass. And I just love how Carol was just like, girl, we got this. We're going to show out. And
She's such a
commenting.
sweetheart.
A lot of artists don't do that. You put them
Oh
on the
yeah.
bill and they just show up
Yeah.
to perform. They're not actually engaged with the comments. No, she's engaged with the comments. She's reposting, she's sharing. I mean, and for me, that, man, hats off, because I was like, wow, people will say Latinas should be supporting Latinas, or women supporting women.
Hmm.
And I'm like, I'm over that shit. I'm like, I need to see y'all doing something. Like, y'all
Right.
can't just be putting the meme
Y'all just
up.
over here, right, right. Y'all over here talking that talk, but ain't walking the walk.
It's like, what is that? What does that really look like, supporting other women? She definitely, for me, that's the epitome, like just showing how she has been promoting the event and supporting the other female artists that's on the bill.
I
I love
love that.
it.
That's awesome.
Oh, look
Well,
at you backstage.
Fancy pants.
I know. And that day too, it was crazy. Because a friend of mine, he's an artist and he's cool with everybody, and so we were already there because she was playing at my venue, and Snow was. But Carolyn, she came out and she did a quick little song. It was cool, and then we just ended up backstage, and I was like, oh my God, that's Carolyn Rodriguez right there. Like, oh, and I had met her before, but then I met her again, and she's just so down to earth, very nice lady.
And it goes back to, she's in the rap industry.
Yeah.
Music industry, regardless rap what genre it is, but she's in the music industry, which is so male dominated.
Yeah.
And I love that she holds her own. That to me is something to be respected. I work with the
Oh
lowrider,
yeah.
and people will say, you work with the men, like you, and I'm like, no, you don't have. You have to understand, like we just have to demand that respect.
Mm-hmm.
And if you carry
Yes.
yourself and you know your stuff, you do your research, you know your stuff, um, they will respect you.
Yeah.
And it's us commanding that through just how we show up, right? And
Yeah.
and I know this podcast is over the 30 minutes, but I'm building a car right
No,
now, 66 Pontiac, and I'll show up and start working on it there at the shop, and that's one of my self-care rituals.
I love it,
Just go work
girl.
on the car, and I say, I said, because I ain't gonna have none of y'all saying y'all built this car for me. I was like,
Yes. Yes.
so I have my little toolkit and I go out there and I work on it. But that's what I love about Caroline. And just encouraging women, like we can be in male dominated spaces.
And still get respect.
Mm-mm.
I love that you said that because everybody loves to mention that song. This is a man's world, but listen to the rest of the song because it says it wouldn't be nothing without a woman or a girl.
Exactly.
Well, Moni, we appreciate you so much for spending this time with us. We love you. We appreciate you for sharing so much with us, all the things that you're doing. So I commend you. And, I hope that you never stop doing what you're doing. And I
Yeah.
wish you all the success in everything that you're doing. You deserve it. And I can't thank you enough for giving us this time.
Yes. Thank you so much.
We're going to wrap it up. You guys be kind, make good choices, be the best that you can be, and don't have a good day. Have a
Have
great
a
day,
great
guys.
day.
Bye.